You're a parent and a prospective homeowner, and you want your children to go to a highly ranked public school. Does that make you a bad person? Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Last Honest Realtor podcast. I'm your host, David Fleming. The answer to that question is no, it does not make you a bad person. It makes you a very good parent. And to be perfectly honest, it makes you part of an overwhelming majority of prospective home, and by home I mean freehold, buyers that specifically look at the public schools in those catchment areas. Now, there are many out there in society who would believe in this concept of sort of fairness, as it were, that, people who can afford to buy more expensive homes in more expensive areas also benefit from better schools. And I understand that argument, except that's really the chicken and the egg argument, is it not? Were these good schools there before house prices went up? Or have house prices gone up because the good schools are there? Now, some would argue, and I don't want to get into an educational debate, that more affluent individuals are able to pay for, Kumon or extra help, and thus those individuals and those children will benefit from the greater wealth and the school rankings will increase. Now, as I said, don't want to get into too much of a discussion about schools today, but disclaimer necessary, my mother was a public school teacher for many, many years. In fact, my mother taught at Beverly Acres from 1972 to 1978. She then went to Johnsview from 1979 to 1981. Maternity leave from 1981 to 1988. Yeah, I remember when she told me she was going back to teach, and I was like, you have a job? This is news to me, Mom. She taught at Parkside, which is over at Woodbine and O'Connor, 1988 to 2000, taught at Robert Service from 2000 to 2005. Then my mom retired, and she supply taught at John A. Leslie for 14 years. 2005 to 2019. Now, my sister is also a teacher. My sister is a high school teacher. I'm not going to out her in terms of where she currently works, but 23 years and counting. And suffice it to say, I think I do know a thing or two about public schools. Now, another disclaimer. I'm also a middle-aged white conservative male, so my opinions are going to be slightly biased here. And if you're a public school teacher, you're going to want to sharpen your proverbial pencil as you prepare to jump into the comments section today. And even if you're not a teacher, but you're really involved in your local community and you're passionate about the intersection of neighborhoods, communities, families, and schools, I am sure you will have a thought or two about today's podcast as well. Now, I have many thoughts on the public schools, which may or may not be relevant. Like I said, what is the Last Honest Realtor without some middle-aged white guy rant? To give you an idea of where I'm coming from, I'm a product of the public school system in the 1980s and 1990s, and a lot has changed. For those of you that are younger, actually, and for those of you that are older, I think the only ones not really learning from this are folks that are my age. I want to take you back to when I was in public school and we actually got marks like grade 6. I get like a 81 in science. We started to do away with that. Now kids get 1, 2, 3, or 4, whatever that is. We used to keep score in gym class. Kids learned that there are losers and there are winners, and now everyone's a winner. I remember in grade 6 working my tail off on a project on rocks in science because all of the kids who got the A would have their duotangs stuck up on the bulletin board. And I remember I got an A, and it was up there on the bulletin board. And somewhere along the way, somebody said, we can't do this anymore because what does it say to the kids that didn't get the A's? We placate the lowest common denominator now in public schools. Have I offended you yet? Listen, my sister's a high school teacher. She has a kid that gets like 6% in a class. Doesn't come all year. And then in June, when she's like, okay, well, the kid got 6, so he obviously fails, you get the principal or the guidance counselor says, can we just pass him? Because, hey, he's a nice kid. So then you pass him, and you pass him, and you pass him. And then what? You graduate and you've learned absolutely nothing in terms of accountability, responsibility. Don't even get me started on they go to university and they want to pass for showing up. Then they get in the real world and now we're going to have to look after them too. So how's that for a middle-aged white guy rant? The public school system in the 1980s and 1990s was very, very different from what it is today. And you know what? One final thought. There's a YouTube video on old math versus new math, right? And we came up memorizing multiplication tables. Okay, now like new math, exploratory, whatever. This video has a split screen. And on the left is a guy doing a multiplication question using the math that we learned. And on the right is new math. He finishes it in like 20 seconds, and then it shows him making a coffee and taking his dog for a walk. And 4 minutes in, you've got the lady with new math. She's drawing boxes around numbers and making squigglies. And literally Google YouTube old math versus new math, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So, as I said, there is my rant on the public school system. Having said that, most people send their kids to public school. There's a whole other conversation about public versus private. And in the intersection of real estate prices and public schools, we want to answer the question, does it impact house prices? Now, I would say yes, unequivocally it does, but we want to explore where and how. And I'm going to do that by telling a few different stories. So I want to say first and foremost, guys, when I work with a new client that's looking for a house, there are 4 specific things that I tell them to consider. 1 is public transit. 2 is access to parks. 3 is the supporting retail infrastructure, right? Walking out to the main drag or being able to drive to get groceries. And 4 is the public schools. Now, you can put those in any order you want, but these 4 things are the external considerations, the thing that you think about outside of the house itself. Now, pick a neighborhood, and we could pick any neighborhood. So let's say Roncesvalles, for example. You look at the first thing, public transit. Okay, you can walk up to Bloor. You've got the Up Express, which no one really ever takes. You've got the Go, which, again, I don't know if you're using that in Ronces, but you have the TTC streetcar there. And as you know, we don't have the best transit system. We certainly don't have a lot of subways. Sorry, I meant subway. So you've got the Bloor line. You could take the Queen streetcar and you could go east all the way into the city. So maybe you get a 6 out of 10 for that. Parks, well, you've got Sororan Park. You've also got High Park to the west, which is probably the best park and the most famous park in the city of Toronto. Next, you have the supporting commercial retail. Roncesvalles Avenue. It's a hot spot, right? Had a local agent take me for a coffee there and a croissant. Wasn't Tim Hortons. She's probably watching this. Was not Tim Hortons. Didn't enjoy it. Didn't have enough salt and it wasn't watered down enough for me. I don't enjoy a great bean. But, you know, people with, what's it called? Class, taste, and sophistication will enjoy it. And all the folks in Ronces, whether you live east of Roncesvalles Avenue or west of Roncesvalles Avenue, they are able to walk out to that main drag, which is fantastic. Last but not least, you've got schools. Garden Avenue, Fern Avenue, very, very popular schools, typically very highly ranked. Folks, you could play this game all day, right? I could take Leaside around the corner. You've got Besbro, North Lee, Rolfe, highly ranked schools. You're walking out to Bayview. You could go down to Laird with the big box. Transit, pretty poor. Right? Subway's a bit of a hike. Oh yeah, you've got the new LRT. And then parks, man, there's amazing parks. So those are the 4 things that I always look at when I educate clients, assuming that, you know, they're going to fit the mold of, eventually be a young growing family. When we're looking at freehold properties, those are the 4 things I tell them to consider. Now, some people send their kids to private school. Number 4 on our list isn't important. Some people don't pay public transit. Number 1 on the list is important. But the purpose of today's conversation, we're going to discuss how important public schools are to the folks that send their kids to public schools, since that's an overwhelming majority of buyers. Now, first, I want to tell a story. This is going to, it's actually kind of funny because it's kind of a backwards story. And by backwards, you'll see what I mean in a minute. I sell a house to a young couple in Riverdale, and their kids are going to PAPE. And they're on, like, let's say a Withrow or a Riverdale or, you know, a Bain or something like that, or a Victor. And many years later, as it happens in my business, unfortunately, they are going to split. Very, very common. Now, she is keeping the house and he is looking for something else. So he says he wants to look for another house in Riverdale. And he says to me, and this is very interesting, I want to be east of PAPE. Said by nobody ever looking in Riverdale. And I couldn't really understand it. And again, no offense to anyone that is east of PAPE. Listen, I am not trying to knock areas or schools or demographics today. I'm trying to use facts, so please don't blame me for using facts. But hear me out on this. East of PAPE puts you in a different school district. It's Blake Street. Blake Street. You go there, your kids go there, okay? Godspeed. I am just pointing out a fact, and it is math when I tell you what the rankings are. But for most people, they will consider rankings from the Fraser Institute for one school versus another. And it so happens that if you were to look at the rankings today, Pape Avenue ranks a 9.7 out of 10. That's 42nd out of 3,000 schools. Blake Street ranks a 5.8, 1,700th out of 3,000. Now, at the time, when this client was looking there, I think Blake Street ranked like in the 3s. So kudos to Blake Street for getting the Fraser Institute ranking up, which again, many people will comment and say, who cares about Fraser Institute rankings? Guys, just work with me here. So when my client said, I want to target a house east of Pape Avenue, it made absolutely no sense. But then he explained something to me. The house that they owned was already in Pape District. The kids already have that address. So why in the world would he then spend more money to get a house that's west of Pape so his kids can go to Pape when they're already enrolled in Pape and his wife has that Pape address? So what we ended up doing believe it or not, was buying him a house, and let's say it's on one of the Spark Halls or Baines or what have you, the Rocksters, the Dingwalls. He bought a house for like $600K that if it was on the west side probably would have been $800,000. Now, maybe it doesn't appreciate as much, but at the time, and I'm very sympathetic to those that split up because it's very common, unfortunately, where most people that split up need to sell the house. And they often end up renting or buying something smaller. I do a lot of divorces. What do they say in real estate, the D's? Diapers, diamonds, divorces, deaths. What an awful saying. I can't believe I just included that in the video. There's also a fifth D. I can't remember what it is. But point is, I do see a lot of divorces. And in this case, they were able to work things out, stay nearby. And he lived, I don't know, like 4 blocks from where his kids were. And I don't know how the divorce works. You go back and forth. But point being, guys, when I said I'm going to tell a story that's kind of the opposite or kind of the reverse, normally you're targeting a school district. You're buying into a great school district. You're paying more to get in that district. But here, my first story today is explaining how you could actually save money by moving into an area where the feeder school is not as good because your children were already in that feeder school based on the wife's address. So that is the impact that public schools can have on the value of a home. And earlier this month, I read an article in the Globe and Mail. It was called "Parents Are Paying a Premium to Live Near Top-Rated Schools. Here's What It's Costing Them." So this is Globe and Mail from July 8th. Now I'm going to read from the article and try not to do it in that sassy voice. 10 years ago, Toronto realtor Sean Mayers says homebuyers often open discussions by talking about commute times. Now the first question they ask me is, what's the school like? Mr. Mayers has watched parents and would-be parents increasingly pay for smaller, older homes in their desired school catchment. Same bricks, same square footage, but on one side of an invisible line is worth 6 figures more. Ilan Portoni, sorry if I mispronounced that, who also sells homes in Toronto, says he started noticing homebuyers stretching their dollar even further and earlier in life to secure housing in a well-rated district. They're often going to the very max of their budget, he said, sometimes before even having children. People in the last few years are getting stuck, so clients who don't even have kids yet ask a lot more questions about the schools. Now, first I would argue that this phenomenon isn't new. And credit to the people that say 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I was being asked about public schools just as much as I am today. But here are the points that are interesting, and I wish I had my yellow highlighter here. He says there's an invisible line, and it's worth 6 figures more. I told you about PAPE. It's an invisible line. I mean, it's not invisible because buses go up and down it, and it's always closed down at Riverdale, and you have to take a detour. But that invisible line, and he said 6 figures, is the exact story that I told you from my client that had his kids in PAPE District, bought a house in Blake Street, and enabled his kids to continue to stay in PAPE and save $200,000. Now, we also said stretching their dollar further earlier in life to secure housing in a well-rated district, and then says before they're having children. Yes, absolutely. I get this conversation all the time. And now he said, the first gentleman, Sean Mayers, says homebuyers often open discussions by talking about commute times. I mean, doesn't this go back to my very first point about transit, parks, schools, and retail infrastructure? Those are the 4 things. Okay, they didn't teach this in a real estate text somewhere. So I could pat myself on the back. I could say, yeah, those are the 4 things that I personally value when I work with first-time freehold buyers. Now, of those, as we discussed, some people don't take public transit. They don't care. Some people are sending their kids to private school. They don't care. Those 4 things are huge. In this article, they're saying that it used to be about commute times. Now it's about school districts. And ironically, we'll make the point about the commute time to school because walkability is super important as well. Now, many of today's homebuyers are living on the Fraser Institute website, and this has been the case for some time. And I should have mentioned when I was talking about those scores, I said that Pape Avenue ranks a 9.7 and Blake Street ranks a 5.8. You go to, and you can Google it, https:// I had to. Come on, it's funny. Most people don't even consider that. Go to compareschoolrankings.org to see for yourself. That is where the Fraser Institute rankings are, or just Google Fraser Institute if you want and forget my World Wide Web address. So the article above, which I just mentioned, tries to put some data to this theory. Listen to this from the article. Globe and Mail analyzed data from real estate company House Sigma and Fraser Institute rankings and found that living near the top 30 public schools in the Greater Toronto Area commands a premium of roughly $60,000 to $70,000, or the equivalent of 5 to 7% for detached homes, 4 to 6 per attached. In BC, this premium can be even higher, reaching a median premium of 10.5%. Though top-scoring public schools in the GTA aren't in the priciest parts of central Toronto, instead clustering predominantly in the Markham and Richmond Hill suburbs. We'll come back to that. The price tag of homes in those areas consistently exceeded the municipal median. 11 of the top 20 ranked neighborhoods for school scores are situated in Markham. Virtually all of them command a significant premium over the northeast Toronto suburbs overall. Municipal median price of $1.5 million for detached homes, $1.04 million for attached homes, going to as much as 10% for an attached home in Middlefield, and often even higher. For example, in the newer family-oriented Victoria Manor Jennings Gate neighborhood. So yeah, cool story, Hansel. Zoolander reference? How about another one? That's the greatest story ever. Do you have time to tell it again? Super bad. So very cool story, but to be perfectly honest, and I'm a data nerd, I don't know that you can use these data points. You can make numbers say anything you want, and kudos to them for doing that. But they're talking about the highly ranked schools in Markham. I mean, there's a big demographic difference there, for example, and the conversation no one wants to have, which I'll gladly have, is that when you have a lot of schools in the central core that have a demographic where English is a second language, you think the scores are going to be lower, and I'm defending it, right? And the folks that don't like the rankings will be the first one to mention that. And often it's a function of demographics and wealth. And that's unfortunate for the rankings because, as I'll talk about later, I'm the guy that cares about the outdoor facilities, the after-4 programs, what the teachers are like. So, great schools in Markham, fine. And you go to the Fraser Institute rankings and you look, and yes, most of those top schools are in Markham. But for the purpose of our discussion today, I personally think in order to educate people and explain from a real estate perspective how house prices make a difference, I'm going to put this data aside and I'm going to tell stories because I have enough stories and I work with enough clients to explain exactly how public school rankings can impact home prices. So now here's a story. About 10 or 12 years ago, I received an email from a man who says he wants to buy an investment property in Leaside. Now, that didn't come as a surprise to me, but what did come as a surprise was when he told me that he lived in Scarborough and the home that he owned was worth, I don't know, maybe like 20% more than the investment property he was looking to buy. Now, that's a spoiler alert because what I did first was I sent him listings and I educated him on the price of 1-bedrooms, the price of 1+ dens, the price of 2 bedrooms. I looked at what they rent for, what the return on investment is, what the cash flow situation will be like. And he emailed me back and he said, "Any bachelors?" Sure. I mean, yeah, we could look at some junior 1-bedrooms. And I said, look, I don't like 1+ dens. I find the return isn't as good. I like as big a 1-bedroom as you can get, or maybe a small 2-bed, 2-bath. The yield is really good on that. And he said, no, I want the cheapest condo that I could possibly find. So they weren't in high demand. And I said, listen, I'll keep you on my list and I'll let you know when something hits. There's only a couple buildings. This is going back to, where Aerodrome and Brian Peck Crescent and Vanderhoof are. There's a whole cluster of buildings there now. But this was back when you had the townhouses on Aerodrome, which ironically, someone told me once was called Daddy Divorceville because all the dads that got divorced and they lived in Leaside, they would end up renting there. And then one day I did a video and I called it Daddy Divorceville. And then a bunch of people got really, really angry at me. That was back when the internet was like a beautiful place as opposed to now. And yeah, people took issue with that, but I wasn't wrong because there was a lot of people that, moved into there when they got divorced from Leaside. So aside from that, those were the original townhouses in the area. Brian Peck Crescent, I think, was the first condo. And we went in eventually and we found a very small junior 1-bedroom. Now I brought this gentleman in and he took a very quick look. He was in and out, and I would have thought he was a very, very experienced investor because he really didn't care what the unit looked like. He was walking around. He was looking at the building amenities. He was out on the street. He was looking around at all the different areas and like, what's around here? It's like commercial industrial. What in the world is this guy thinking? So I finally asked him, what was important to him. And he said he knew absolutely nothing about condos and, quote, even less about condominium investing. I bluntly said, what is your interest? And he said, I'm buying the public school catchment. It's the first time anyone ever said that to me. He told me that he had a 5-year-old daughter, and where he lived in Scarborough, he didn't want her going to school there. He said, we want the best for my daughter. We're only going to have one child, my wife and I, and we want to send her to a good school. Now, the feeder school for this particular condominium on Brian Peck Crescent was North Lee Public School. That's in Leaside, for those that aren't aware. It's also one of the best ranked JK to 8 schools you'll find in the Central Core, and it is home to the prestigious French immersion program. where a young David Fleming went for 1 year in 1985 before I drove everyone nuts and my parents sent me back to Besbro. So I'm just saying. So French immersion, true story. French immersion, yes. Highly ranked, yes. Beautiful field turf, fantastic amenities, quaint, quiet, upscale neighborhood, but absolutely geographically nowhere near where this guy lived. And it's funny because I said to him, where do you live? And calculating the drive every morning was like 35, 40 minutes. And he said to me, the schools in our area are terrible. English is very poor. They teach down to the kids at the bottom. I can't afford to send my daughter to a private school, but I can afford to make a down payment on this condo, use the address, send her to North Lee, which is like sending her to private school for me. And then he added, a few $1,000s wasted on land transfer tax and 35 minutes to school every morning is absolutely priceless for the life I'm going to give my little girl. And that's what he did. He purchased a condo, a junior one bed, you ready for this, for $240,000. And this was, I think, just a year or two after they mandated 20% down on second properties. So like he made a down payment of $48,000. I mean, before that rule came in, it could have been 12 grand. And it's not like it's a sunk cost. You're buying equity and he still owns it. I'm not going to say too much about him. But we rented the condo out. It was essentially cash flow neutral, give or take, but that didn't matter. So for the out-of-pocket cost of a few $1,000s land transfer tax, he sends his daughter to North Lee from grade 1 onward. Then she goes to Leaside High School. And she's now heading to university. Completely changed the life, right? Beautiful story or not? Like some people won't like this story. One of two reasons, I would think. One is, well, you shouldn't have to do that. You shouldn't have to. I get it, but it's just, you do have to, and I'm sorry, right? And equality for all, like, yeah, I wish the school that his daughter was supposed to go to was as good as North Lee. It wasn't. These are facts. I'm sorry. And the second reason that people might not like it is sort of like an outsider. And that's BS to me, like this guy had the foresight. I mean, there's lots of people that have access to that kind of capital and just didn't do it. But some people would be like, yeah, that's an outsider. I mean, I don't buy that argument. So interestingly, the boundaries seem to have changed because this building, if you look at it now, falls into Besbro School catchment. But it's important to note that somebody could still conceivably purchase a condo on Vanderhoof Avenue, Brian Peck Crescent, or Aerodrome Crescent and use the address to send their children to a top school. Now, as I film this podcast, I am currently working with another one of my longtime clients to do something very similar. Now, their daughter attended a school from JK through grade 8 based on a previous address where they had been renting. And I don't know the ins and outs of the system, but eventually they bought a house out of the area, but their daughter was already there. They had that address and their daughter went from, I don't know if it was JK, but let's say that their daughter has now finished grade 8 and was able to stay in this incredible school district all the way through, even though they didn't live there. Now, here's the rub. The school that all the other kids are going to is very sought after and highly ranked. That's the high school, right? Because just finished grade 8. The school that my client's daughter is now being forced to attend is the complete opposite. And again, I don't know why it wasn't grandfathered in. Apparently, and I said, forgive me for not knowing the ins and outs of this, but she was told by the school admin that the catchment area resets when the kids enter high school. So all of her friends and all of the kids that she's known all the way through to the end of grade 8 are going this way to one school. And now she is not able to go because of where she lives. So what does my client do? They say, find us a small 1-bedroom condo in that catchment and we will buy it and we will rent it out and our daughter will go to that school. It's thinking outside the box, to be perfectly honest, And now the two situations that I described above deal with individuals purchasing investment properties. They can use the address to qualify their kids for a better school. But how important is the public school catchment to those buyers that are looking for a home within the neighborhood where their children will attend school? It's absolutely crucial. In fact, I would say it's the top criteria for most of my freehold buyers with children or with children on the way. Another fun story. I'm showing a house last year in Plater Estates, and I won't give away the street address, and this is absolutely wild. So let's call it Fake Street. And let's say that the address is 198 Fake Street. If you go to the TDSB School Finder and you type in the address, you can see the cutoff for Jackman Public School is 196 Fake Street. This is 198 Fake Street. And it goes to a different district. And again, like if I say it was Chester or Franklin or whatever, R.H. McGregor, doesn't matter. I'm not knocking those schools. What I'm saying is that from a mathematical standpoint, right or wrong, if Jackman ranks a 9 and the other school ranks a 6, it's going to affect real estate prices. Literally right on the line. Now you go back to the gentleman that was interviewed in that newspaper and he referred to the invisible line. The line was pretty visible to me. It was the driveway separating the two detached houses. I kid you not. We looked at the first house to the east of that invisible line for the catchment areas. So my clients decided to pass on this house, and I suspect that many other folks did as well for the very same reason. But when you consider the intersection of house prices and public schools, also consider that many buyers will refuse to leave their current catchment, and this affects supply and demand. So another story, I mentioned, I think my stories are better than the data that they try to provide, but consider this. I have clients whose children are in the Rolfe Road School District in Leaside. Now, Besbro School, well, it's higher ranked. It goes to grade 8, but they won't leave Rolfe. So there you go. So it's not just about rankings, right? You could be like, oh, Besbro School, it goes right to grade 8. And by the way, it's higher ranked. No, they're like, we're not leaving our school catchment. So what that does, and ironically, let me give you the current rankings. Okay, Rolfe ranks a 7.6. It's 532nd out of over 3,000. Besbro ranks a 9.9. Again, rankings are what they are. But these folks are not going to move out of Rolfe Road School District. And what that does is it puts a tremendous amount of pressure on the limited supply of housing that's out there. So if you have a ton of people refusing to leave their little hamlet, if and when a suitable house comes up for sale, you can have a small number of people driving that price up massively. Now, I can't tell you how many times a public school catchment comes up in the conversations I have with home buying clients. I could tell a lot more stories, but I think the point has been made. These are the two takeaways, folks. Almost every freehold buyer is going to have some value placed on the local public school. And number two, it's not a question of whether or not public schools affect home prices. It is by how much. Now, one more nugget of information as far as this subject goes. Do you want to know who is more interested in public school catchments as it pertains to their housing search than any group I've ever met? Americans. I don't know why, and you might think that they're all about, private schools or some elitist situation. No, I work with a lot of transplants and relocations, and our friends from south of the border are always asking about the public schools. They want to know about rankings, the number of students, the demographics, the outdoor fields and amenities, the walkability. They want to know if there's a little yellow school bus that picks the kids up and drops them off. That's pretty American, wouldn't you say? Surprisingly, most of these folks don't end up sending their kids to private school, even the very wealthy ones. I don't know if it's just how they were raised or what they're used to back home, but it seems that they love a good public school. So what are the takeaways here from my stories and my rants, if you will? Spoiler alert, home prices will absolutely, positively be affected by public schools. But what do we look for? Because it's not just the Fraser Institute rankings. In fact, many educators will tell you not to look at those rankings. And I've heard this before. In fact, I'm pretty sure I wrote a blog once, and I think it was about schools in Ronces, and maybe it was Parkdale. And like the principal of the school went to my blog to comment and say like, how dare you? I was just saying, if Parkdale ranked a 5 and Fern ranked a 9, it's going to have an impact. But to side with those folks for a moment, which part of me would, I would say the reasons to not just consider Fraser Institute rankings. Number one, many educators don't believe in standardized testings. And there's a million reasons why, which I don't want to get into because it's not an educational podcast. But number two, English as a second language will affect these tests. If you have kids that are struggling to learn English and you put standardized tests in English in front of them, yes, it's going to drag that ranking down. Now, some people are going to say, that's exactly what I want to know. I don't want to send my kids there. I leave that up to them. But there are reasons why standardized testings can be misleading. Now, the fluctuations can be wild. How can a school be ranked 9.0 one year and 7.8 the next? Like, is there really one dumb kid like, Billy, I can't believe you got a 0, and he just drags the test scores down? Many schools will teach the test. Now, we hear this a lot. We hear this from educators that some schools are so obsessed with the standardized test, their entire curriculum for the years that are tested, and it's usually like grade 3 and grade 6, they will teach that test. So, consider I don't know, the parallel to like, I don't know, the cheerleading movie in America where it's like, the entire school is rallying around the cheerleaders because they go to nationals every year and they just completely neglect every other thing because that's their thing. There are some schools where their thing is their Fraser Institute ranking and they need to keep it up. And all they do is teach the test all year. So on that last point, let me get back to another story from back in the day. I went to Besborough Public School. And there was a south yard and a north yard. The south yard was the really, really big one. And that's where the kids from grade 1 to grade 6 went. And grades 7 and 8, you went to the north yard. And that was cool because it was just the 2 grades. You had the basketball court, you had the field, and you kind of had the cliques, right? Like the other kids and the cooler ones, they were always playing basketball. Well, me and my crew, the B crew, we were playing football. There are portables there now. Where I used to play football, every single recess for grade 7 and grade 8, you cannot play football anymore because they put portables there. Now, Besborough School is still ranked a 9.9, so they're doing something right. But my point is there's a lot more that goes into it than just the rankings. I would be tremendously disappointed if my kid went to that school and they couldn't play football where I did because there are portables there. There are portables because what? There's overcrowding, because they need more space, because the school is too small. So consider how much outdoor space there is. Now, what about the schools that have field turf? Of course, the critics could be like, well, that's just a bunch of rich people fundraising and they put together all their money and they build field turf. You're not wrong. But if the school has field turf instead of, dirt and jagged rocks, I mean, that's a good thing regardless of where it came from. A lot of schools have beautiful field turf. Now, what about after 4 activities? What about daycare? What about all of the extras? Are those important to you? Extracurricular activities, like I don't know how that works anymore, but I remember my mom used to take her class, because she was a teacher, as I mentioned, every single year. She would take her class to the chocolate factory in Toronto, and they would learn the caramel secret. Remember in the 80s, some of you have no idea what I'm talking about, their advertising was how do they get the caramel into the caramel bar? Yeah, we learned. Spoiler alert. They make it upside down, pour the caramel in, and then put chocolate on top of it. Womp womp. It's kind of like when you learn the magician's secret. You had the key in your toes the entire time. But my mom used to take her kids on these extracurricular trips, and it was a lot of fun. And, let me toot my mom's horn for a minute. She was an amazing teacher. She taught French. No one likes the French teacher. I got suspended in grade 5 for tormenting Madame Ely. Meanwhile, my mother's a French teacher over at Parkside. My mom taught French in a school where most of the kids were ESL and newcomers. They did not want to learn French. So what did my mom do? She got me to take all of the old posters I didn't want of basketball players and soccer players. She put them up all around the classroom in the French room. And she taught these kids, ça c'est Michael Jordan, right? They could say it, they could barely speak English, but they loved the idea that they got to talk about sports. That's what a great teacher does. And there are a lot of great teachers out there. So who are the teachers at the schools that you're looking at? It's more than just about the Fraser Institute rankings, guys. And I feel like I shouldn't be doing a podcast on the public education system, but, well, it's hard to talk about public schools and the intersection of prices and school rankings without actually talking about the schools. So if you're listening to the podcast today because you randomly Googled something to do with house prices and public schools, give yourself credit, because the reason that you Googled it means because deep down you already knew that there's a huge correlation. And if you're listening to this podcast today and you're aging like a fine wine, how would I say this? You're a life veteran. You're old. Well, having already sent multiple children through their 20-something years of schooling, just be happy this is something you will never have to deal with again. Because time and time again, guys, when I work with home buyers for the very first time, the public schools, if not at the very top, are damn close near it. And I have the Fraser Institute and the TDSB School Finder bookmarked in my favorites, and they're probably near the top. I think Toronto MLS is at the top, and maybe DocuSign. And after that, it's all about the school rankings, because that is how important schools are to home buyers. And of course, it is going to affect home prices. Now, in case it's not blatantly obvious, how is it going to affect home prices? It's supply and demand. More people want to get into an area because of a school district. That is going to push prices up. Seems to reason. So I recognize the article that I read. They're trying to put some data points to it, and I commend them for doing that. But for me personally, as a real estate agent, as somebody that's out there working every single day with folks that are looking and folks that either have kids or kids on the way, I think the stories are the best way to explain it to you guys. And, a million of them. I literally talked to somebody, should I name the school districts? Okay, let's say out in the West End, in Bloor West Village, in High Park. There are better and worse high schools. Now, I've got a client who, are you ready for this, has 2 kids, and they are in grade 4 and grade 2. And he's told me that he wants to move into the high school district that is better. And I'm like, well, okay, the kid's daughter, I think the older one's going grade 5, so you have 3-4 years left. But the point is, he's 3 to 4 years ahead of it. He's so nervous about the kid going to the one high school, being in the current catchment, that he is 3 to 4 years early. That's how much of an impact it can make. And while recognizing the transfer costs, and the irony is for this guy, it's not like you're going to sell for $1 million and buy for 2.5. No, for this guy, he's like, yeah, we really can't afford to make a huge move up. You're going to pay land transfer tax on the purchase. You're going to pay real estate fees on the sale. You're going to pay legal fees on both. You're going to have moving costs. You're going to buy new furniture. There's a lot of friction costs. And he might be moving from a house that's, 1.7 to a house that's 1.8. Well, eating a massive cost because of the school district, 3 to 4 years ahead. And as I said, that doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a fantastic parent to do that for your kids. So folks, thank you for watching. As always, that is it for this week. Hope you enjoyed the podcast and eager to hear from you. If you want to leave some comments and scathing ones, fine. I think this is one where it's going to hit really close to home. I'm eager to read your comments and your thoughts, whether you're an educator or not, whether you're a homeowner or not, whether you have children or not, whether you're just a random internet troll that wants to tell me what you think. I think this was really cool. I think this is really important, and I think my mother is going to love this one. Please remember, guys, to like, comment, or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you here next time on The Last Honest Realtor.